Good morning guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm on my daily walk again with the dog again, and today I'm walking into woods which I'm hoping there'll be some bluebells. They're certainly starting to appear. Whether they're developed yet I'm not sure, because I haven't been on this particular walk for about 3 days now, and they were showing when I came last time, but I'm not sure that they're actually fully developed, so we'll go and have a look. But in the event that they are, what I'm going to do is I've got the 100 to 400, the 2x converter and the 26mm extension tube on my camera again, and I'm hoping to get a very low level shot from at least the same height as the bluebells, if there are any, of 1 or 2 bluebells, singularly finding a couple that actually look quite nice and artistic, and then process them hopefully back home into something that looks like a nice spring, optimistic, hopefully an optimistic image, because I think a little optimism is what we all need at the moment. So let me get on with it, and I'll bring you up to date when I get into the woods and hopefully find some half decent bluebells. Well, for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll notice that not only am I travelling very heavy today, I've also got major tripod, and I'm wearing the Spring Collection tripod. I often carry a tripod like this. It's a lot easier than carrying it in the hand. I just drop a leg over the shoulder. Makes it a bit easier, but still no less heavy. Anyway, onward in pursuit of beautiful, hopefully, bluebells and snowdrops, it seems. I really love this time of year. The trees are starting to come into leaf. Beautiful, vibrant green, backlighting from the sun. Really some quite spectacular scenery to behold, to be sure. And where better to be at 8 o'clock in the morning than a place like this? Okay, something's just taken my eye. There's a couple of trees in the distance on the edge of the path there, but more immediately there's a small branch growing up just in front of the lens, about 6 or 8 feet. That's making quite a nice out of focus shot. What I'm trying to do is use the trees way out of focus and have the small branch that's growing up in between. I've framed it as well as I can, and I quite like that. That's a simple image, and I love the way the depth of field is amplified by the out of focus of the 2 dark trees in the distance. That's quite a nice picture. I'm going to take that. Now, as you can tell, I've got a 2x converter. I've taken the extender off, but I've got 2x converter and the 100 to 400. And currently the 100 to 400's at 135 times 2, which is 260, so technically I don't need the 2x converter at all, but I've got it on there, and I'm going to take this shot. Now, there's no air movement at all. That's completely stationary, that little twig in front of me. In fact, if the dog runs past, he'll probably create more flipping wind than there is here moving around anyway. But before I move on to the bluebells, I want to just capture that shot because I think that's quite a nice little image. And I've got a 10-second timer on here because the slightest movement on the camera or the lens. Ozzy, come here. Ozzy's just chosen to be in the frame. Photo bombing my picture. The 10-second timer's counting down. Ozzy, come here. And there we have it. The next trick is to see how well that is. As you can see, it's got motion in it from, there is a small amount of wind now. I'll have to bump the ISO up and try a bit harder. Let's take it up to 400, get a 40th of a second should be enough. 40th of a second, f13. I'll just check the focus on that. It wasn't quite in focus either, which doesn't help. There we go. Now 10-second timer and try again. And a quick chimper. As you can see, the red focus peaking is working on the camera nicely. If I zoom in on that, I can't put the camera too close because it causes the screen to black out. There we are, we've got focus peaking happening quite nicely. So let's have a look at that leaf and see what we've got, if anything. Now that is in focus. I can even see cobwebs. There's a little bit of noise there because I'm ISO 400, but I can smooth that out. But the cobweb proves to me that's perfectly focused. Okay, on to the Bluebells. Nice little track through the woods. And a nice opportunity to get a shot along the track. So wind the lens in a fair bit, 100, which is 200mm, and I'm going to have a very, 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 very narrow depth of field here, obviously. So what I'm hoping to do is wind the aperture open wide enough to get all this shot in focus. I don't know if I'll be able to. It's quite nicely framed. In fact, 40th of a second, sorry, f40, 1/6 of a second, and a dog in the middle of the frame. Come here. 10-second timer again. Just a nice little shot setting the scene of the Bluebells. There aren't as many Bluebells yet, it's a little bit early. There's a lot of snowdrops though, I think that's what they are. Little white flowers, very pretty. Ozzy, good boy. That's got that. Let's have a check on the focus on that. The light levels are quite low. The sun is a bit diffused by cloud, which is helping a lot because if the sun's directly on these, the whites on the flowers tends to blow out. And that's the image I was just trying to take. Obviously not with the dog in the scene, although he makes a fine walk-on part. It's just a nice woodland scene, nice little path, leading line, nice verticals framing the image. The images I'm hoping to get is pretty much this section here, including the path, because I'll show you on the back of the camera what we actually got, because I've got the camera in portrait mode. There is the image, a little bit of work in Photoshop to sort of highlight the path a little bit, and I think that'll be quite a startling image. Anyway, I still need to get some Bluebells. The whole objective was close up, so I'll find a nice little patch, and there looks to be quite a nice little patch over there, about 30 meters away, which looks quite promising. They're quite dense, the Bluebells over there. So I think I'll go and set up, and then I'll talk you through what I get when I get there. Alright, here we've got to remove this safety piece and hook. And we'll turn the head around upside down because I want a low level shot. That comes up there, lock that in place. Put that on because if I don't and that slips down, that can go right the way through and everything drops to the floor, which isn't what I want. So let's get the camera nice and low. And that's a bit too low, probably about there. Yeah, it's quite a nice little scene I'm setting up there, if I can ever get the application to talk to the camera properly. Come along. Okay, I've got the application running, and lo and behold, we've got a nice scene there, although upside down. Turn it round. Now my issue is, where am I going to focus this? How close or how far away? Now we need the extension tube for this, so a quick switch of the extension tube. Reset the application because it almost certainly has died in the meantime. Oh, it hasn't. That's amazing. Right, now I've got to find somewhere to focus here because that's in focus. ISO 400. 10-second timer. Here we go. Now I've got a lot of bluebells in this shot and a twig which I'll remove in a minute. I've only just noticed, and it's quite nice. The only problem with it is the foreground is in focus, which it should be. The background with the dog in it's out of focus, and I can see the twig in question, so I'll just walk into the frame and take that. We never change the scenery. Yes, we do. That should make a difference. Okay, where are we now? Ozzy, get out of the way. Right, so that's better. We don't have a twig in the middle of the frame. Now I can pull in the long focus on the lens. A minor bit of adjusting becomes a major bit of adjusting. But it goes to show, when you can see the magnification that the focus assist gives me on this application, just how much the tiniest bit of motion makes to the image. Now we're getting focus slowly. I think that's as good as it's going to get. So let's have that one. 10-second timer. Oi, don't walk in front of the camera, nitwit. I think that one probably works for here, actually. I will move on to somewhere else. I think we'll leave that already in place, ready for the next shot. Wind that in, pull the camera up a bit. Got to be careful the legs are not going to collapse completely here. And I can carry it like that for a short distance without any real problem. So that's what we'll do. I think it's quite important to mention the light levels in here. The sun is up, obviously, it's daylight, but it's actually behind some quite thin cloud. And what that's doing is it's causing there to be no patches of direct sunlight. And in here, that works really well, mainly because the vibrance that comes from the leaves when they're backlit on the trees is very difficult to capture. And the dynamic range is very high when the sun's actually directly on them. But under these lighting conditions, it's really very pleasant. It's much more subtle and subdued, and we'll get more from it. So, on to the next place. Well, I had to cut short that last piece to camera because I was getting a low warning on this Sony battery again. I've got to work out what's the matter with this because I'm only getting probably 15 to 20 minutes worth of record time on a single charge from a battery. This doesn't seem right to me. I'll research it on the web later and see if other people in the Sony groups have had similar problems. But I've definitely got one dodgy battery, but I don't think I've got more than one. There's tiny midges flying around. Not trying to bang you on the head or anything like that. But yes, the lighting is really very, very pleasant and subdued here. So I'm going to move on and try and get some more bluebells. It's carpeted with snowdrops, bluebells and other white flowers and wild garlic flowers and the likes. Really very pleasant actually. So it beats being at home cleaning out the koi pond, which is what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'll have to do that later. Filthy job. 10 years worth of not being cleaned. Very unpleasant. Anyway, I won't bore you with that. We'll get on with getting more images here, which is the whole point of this. Anyway, speak to you in a minute. Well, what I want to do next is I want to try and capture some bluebells and snowdrops, but in the context of the trees here as well, because it's very easy to get singular shots of bluebells and snowdrops, but it's not quite got the context. And what I want to try and do is introduce something like, there's a fallen tree with some weird roots on it just in front of me, or at least what's left of the roots that were ripped out of the ground. It's been on the ground for quite some time by the look of it. It's lost most of its bark, and it's really interesting, some lovely texture on it. And I want to incorporate that somehow, so I'll show you the tree. I'll just spin you slowly round. And when I get my gimbal later in the week, this slowly round bit will be a lot smoother. But that's the tree that I'm talking about. And you can see it's got a dog next to it and a lovely bit of root sticking up with some nice, beautiful textures. So I'll just zoom you in slowly on this. And you can see there's some beautiful colour in this tree. And my objective is to try and pull together the nice white and blue of the bluebells and this beautiful red colour of this tree, reddy brown colour. This is an interesting shot actually. I've lined up on this old tree root that I was just showing you, and I've got the bluebells and the snowdrops and everything in the background nicely out of focus but giving colour, and then framed by some further trees that are further out of focus. I think it's quite an interesting thing. And I've got the lens at 400mm and it's on a 2x. I've taken the extension tubes off for this because the object I'm photographing is further away, so I want the greater depth that having the extension tubes off gives me. But I got a comment on one of my last videos about when I did the first one with the 2x on and the extension tubes, and the guy mentioned that you always lose image quality with 2x converters. I'm not completely sure of that any longer. There was a time in the past, and I'm long enough in the tooth to have seen those days, where 2x converters were pretty general. You just slapped them on any lens and hoped for the best. But with the modern computerized techniques that lenses are designed by, that lens converter there, 2x converter, is a Sony G Master lens. It's specific to only two lenses. It only fits on two lenses, the 70 to 200 and in my case the 100 to 400. And I can't believe Sony's optical engineers would have made something that degraded the image quality noticeably on purpose. There's midges everywhere. And in the past I've actually had tripod mounted 800mm shots out with this combination where no one could criticise the sharpness of what was produced. It was absolutely stellar. I think the main issue, and people probably underestimate this, is how much the slightest amount of vibration can actually ruin image quality. I don't think it's down to optics, I think it's simply down to movement and vibration. Vibration being solid tripod helps counter that. Making sure your camera's settled from any motion, like pressing the shutter or whatever, and giving, in my case now I'm using a 10-second timer, so I've gone away from the Thomas Heaton standard of a 2-second timer to 10, and I'm thinking, well, I know these images will be tack sharp even at 800mm. So in answer to the gentleman that made the point, I think it all depends very much on which converters you use and how carefully you set the image up, whether or not you get what you're expecting from having something close to 800mm of lens on the camera. Obviously we lose light. I know I'm taking 2 stops or more as a result of putting this on here, but for landscape and this sort of still life stuff, that really doesn't matter. And I usually end up winding the aperture closed further still anyway to get a greater depth of field, because the depth of field wide open, even wide open at 800mm with 2 times on, is fractions of inches in some cases for nearer objects, and only a foot or 2 on distant objects. So it pays to wind the lens or the aperture down to something much smaller to give you even close to an acceptable sort of field of depth of field. Anyway, on with the shot. I'm trying something different with this shot now, because the spike of the root, I'll spin you around so you can see the shot. Here is what I'm trying to get. I've got the distant tree trunk, the swathe of white and blue flowers, and I've got this spike of this old root sticking up. And if I focus on the root, everything else is massively out of focus. I've already taken that shot, so let me just pull it up and show you. See, that's the first shot, and as you can see, it's beautifully in focus, the actual old bit of root, and everything else is nicely out of focus. Now what I've done is taken a series of other shots where I've got different focal planes from the tree in the distance to the flowers, and I'm going to attempt to focus blend those, and I'm going to compare that with the image that's got just the root in focus. And what I'm hoping is that that might be quite an interesting image. The sun's come through and I'm now blown out a little bit, but never mind. I'll put both of the pictures up, and I'd be interested in the comments below which one you prefer. Personally, I think I'm going to go for the one that's got the root in focus and everything else out, because I think artistically that's probably a more interesting shot. It's less factual, it's less what I'm seeing with my eyes, but it's more a sort of a representation, artistic representation of what's here. So we'll get on, I'll take a couple more shots and then we'll wind it up, go back and process them, and see you back in the office. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, and please also subscribe so that you get notified when I upload new videos.